God is non-binary.
I've expected the guy to pay because I feel like the man should pay for the first date, and they just don't want to.
So whenever I suggest that trans liberation and Palestinian liberation are inherently linked and we can't have trans liberation without Palestinian liberation, I always get a little bit of pushback.
And I'll just say that if I was an actual transsexual adult trying to blend in and live my best life, these people would piss me off. Up next, it's everybody's favorite part of the podcast, where I react to crazy LGBT TikToks for your viewing pleasure. And I lose brain cells so you can laugh at me and enjoy it. Don't forget to subscribe and hit that like button if you haven't yet. And now let's take a look at our first TikTok, where a trans TikToker compares their struggle to the Palestinian people.
So whenever I suggest that trans liberation and Palestinian liberation are inherently linked and we can't have trans liberation without Palestinian liberation, I always get a little bit of pushback. People are like, well, they're two separate issues. They have nothing to do with each other. You know, they're over there, we're over here, right?
Yeah.
But it's a little frustrating to see that mindset, because everything that Is Not Real does to oppress and marginalize Palestinians are the same tactics that the US does to oppress and marginalize trans people.
Oh.
Like, just one example, trans people in the US are experiencing forced displacement and migration because certain states are more hostile to trans people than others. I think
It's the audacity for me, guys. The sheer audacity it takes to compare your plight as a transgender American in the year 2024 to the plight of a Palestinian person whose home was destroyed with a bomb, whose family members were killed or mutilated, who are caught up in this vicious, horrifying war, is so unhinged and detached from reality that it's frankly insulting to the actual people that are being caught up in that conflict and the tragic, tragic results. First, though, this idea that struggle and oppression everywhere are interconnected has always struck me as something that sounds smart but is actually incredibly stupid. It's just not true that different societies can exist at different levels of freedom or liberation at different times and different places. For example, the US went through a whole women's rights movement where it ended the oppression of women systematically, gave them the right to vote, gave them the rights of full citizens, and all that. And all the while, in parts of the Middle Eastern world, women were being viciously oppressed. Doesn't change the fact that women were liberated in America. That happened even while bad things were happening to women in other places. Because oppression dynamics are not, in fact, all interlinked and interconnected. It's just one of those talking points that they say that like sounds kind of poetic, but it's just not true if you think about it for more than 5 seconds. So, I mean, whatever your view is on the Israel-Palestine conflict, the idea that it has any relevance or bearing on debates over transgender rights and gender activism in the United States is kind of absurd. It doesn't. They're totally different issues. They're not related in any way whatsoever. And the notion that the federal government of the United States or state governments are using the same tactics that the Israeli government is using to the Palestinians here on our soil towards trans people is unhinged alarmism with no basis in reality whatsoever. Personally, I am not aware of any bombs being dropped on transgender people in the United States. Maybe I just missed that headline, though. I'm not aware of a literal war being fought in the neighborhoods that people live in who are transgender in America. And to compare the forced displacement of Palestinian civilians and trans people who choose to relocate to different states because they disagree with laws being passed about high school sports rules or whether kids can get sex changes or whatever is so offensive. You're literally just moved somewhere because you disagree with the politics. That's a normal thing, and in fact, it's part of how our system is supposed to work. And you're comparing that to people who are being forced to flee their home by a literal war. Babe, your Delulu is showing. And you desperately need to get off TikTok and touch some grass. Speaking of people who need to get off TikTok, let's check in on friend of the show, Jeffrey Marsh, the non-binary TikToker who has thoughts about your religion. Jump scare warning.
God is non-binary. If man
Oh?
is made in God's image and woman is made in God's image, and there's one God, well, it's pretty obvious, isn't it?
So look, I'm not a religious person, and I'm not somebody who is informed about the Bible and Christianity and can deeply refute this, but it seems self-evidently obvious to me that God is not non-binary in the same way that human beings now in 2024 claim to be non-binary because they don't personally subscribe to or fit in with various crude sexist stereotypes that they still attach to gender when they should stop. And more importantly, this is the kind of trans activism that just really rubs me the wrong way, because it's like you're going out of your way to essentially mock people's religion or to try to thumb your nose of your gender identity and push it on them and push it on their faith. And you know that you're kicking the hornet's nest. You know that you're stirring up resentment when you do stuff like that. But apparently you don't care. You're just that desperate for clicks and attention and therefore indirectly or directly more money and fame for yourself. You don't really care if you antagonize the people who you really need to get to support you in a democratic country. You don't care if you make acceptance go down, if you increase intolerance by intentionally being abrasive and trollish with your content towards Christians. It's just fun for you because you get more clicks and attention for yourself, and the community be damned. That, to me, isn't trans activism in any meaningful sense of promoting tolerance and acceptance for transgender people. It's self-aggrandizing nihilism, destroying trans acceptance for your own enrichment and fulfillment. That's pretty gross, if you ask me, but what do I know? Up next, this transgender person, maybe, allegedly, just transitioned to suddenly identifying as a woman and now wants men to pay up on dates. Let's take a listen.
Hey everyone, sorry I look like a hot mess today. I just wanted to vent a little bit. I feel like dates can be so cheap. The last couple of dates that I've gone on, I've expected the guy to pay because I feel like the man should pay for the first date, and they just don't want to. And so I just had a date earlier this afternoon, and I sat there when the bill came, and finally I just said, the guy should pay first, and kind of pushed it towards him, and he said, well, in that case, you should pay. And I just thought, that is so rude. And I just don't understand what the issue is. I feel like everyone's trying to get something for free these days. I don't understand. I just want to go on a date and have the man be a gentleman and treat me right, treat me like a woman. So if any of you are having the same experience, let me know.
So, I am 99% sure that this is rage bait, that this is engagement trolling. The person you just saw is the former Bachelorette star Josh Sater, whose latest bid for relevancy and attention is a documented transition to now being a trans woman. I don't really buy it or believe that this person is actually transgender. It kind of just looks like they're putting on a shtick for attention or to stay relevant. And I don't want to go too hard in on this video because, like I said, I think this person is just trolling us. I will say, though, that there's something incoherent in a really funny way to me about somebody who's like, gender doesn't exist. I can mean gender. A man and a woman has no meaning and can mean anything, and you can snap your fingers and change and whatever. And also, men should pay for the first date. What? How does that happen? Where's the logic there? And to complain about people wanting things for free in a video in which you are literally wanting things for free is so dumb and so hypocritical that, again, you have to just be trolling us. And I'll just say that if I was an actual transsexual adult trying to blend in and live my best life, these people would piss me off greatly because they're making a joke and a mockery out of the actual transgender experience. They're being intentionally inflammatory, trollish, and divisive online for views and money, even though they're sabotaging acceptance and causing backlash. And that's ultimately going to be to the detriment of genuine trans people. And I do feel bad for them, honestly, that they're being lumped in with trolls like this. That's just my take. You let me know what you think of this video and the other interesting TikToks that we reacted to, let me know in the comment section below. And don't forget to hit that like button while you're at it. And with that, that is it for today's episode of the Damage Control podcast. We will be off next week for the 4th of July holiday, but thank you so much for tuning in. Please do consider rating and reviewing if you're listening on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, and share the podcast with somebody you know who could use a little bit of a sane, reasonable take on LGBT issues, because that's the number one way the podcasts grow, is through word of mouth and through sharing with a friend. So please do that to help us out. And with that, we'll talk again in a couple of weeks.